Hi, I'm Dr. Ron Frederick. I'm glad you could join me. In this video series, we're going to be looking at relationships. In particular, our relationships with our partners, our romantic relationships. And the question that is the theme of this video series is, why is it so difficult to really love like we mean it? In other words, why can our relationships be so challenging at times? What keeps us from having healthier, more satisfying relationships? What we're going to do is we're going to look at first the what. What is the problem? What's getting in our way? Then we'll look at the why. For instance, why are we having this problem? Where did it come from? What's causing it? And then we're going to look at how we can begin to address the problem. I'm going to share with you a proven 4-step process that I've developed to help you overcome the barriers that are getting in your way of your relationship so that you can really have the relationship that you want. But before we get there, let's start off with looking at the what. As a psychologist, people come to me with a whole range of problems, whether they're feeling depressed or they're feeling anxious, they're having problems at work, family. And the thing that really unites any of these problems that often is causing the most pain for people has to do with their relationships with their partners, whether that be a spouse or someone you've been seeing, dating, any kind of love relationship, whatever it might be. These are the relationships that are so important to us, and for many of us can cause us such heartache and stress because we want to get them right, but we can't seem to figure out why things keep going wrong. So every day I'm hearing about relationships and the kinds of problems that people face. I hear about relationships that started off well at the very beginning, but have become increasingly more challenging over time. Of course, I hear about relationships where there's a lot of conflict, stress, tension, arguing. I hear about relationships that over time have become distant or lifeless. People talk about feeling misunderstood by their partners, unappreciated, not really seen and valued for who they really are. They talk about feeling disconnected or distant in their relationship, or feeling unsure of the connection, that they feel insecure in some way. It doesn't feel stable to them, that they can really rely on their partner to be there for them. Some of the relationships really look fine on the surface, but underneath there's this niggling sense that something's missing, that really a relationship or my relationship should be more than what it actually is in the moment, should feel differently, should be more gratifying, should be more deeply satisfying. And people are confused. We don't understand, why is it that we're having such a problem? Why do things have to be difficult? It's not without love. There's a lot of love there. And yet, when it comes to the actual doing and connecting, people are having difficulty. And no matter how hard they try, many people keep running into the same kinds of problems. They see patterns that happen over time, recurring patterns and ways of being with their partner that they can't seem to get themselves out of. They keep doing things that don't seem to get them anywhere helpful. There are many things that we could point to and say, well, this is why I'm having a problem in my relationship. Work has been really stressful. I've had a lot of things on my plate. There's so much going on with the kids. We're having trouble with our children. There are financial difficulties. All of those things clearly impact a relationship. But more often than not, when you scratch the surface, we see that there's a problem that's not readily apparent to us, but actually really is what's causing us to have such difficulties. So what is it? What is this problem that really is right under our nose, and yet we don't realize it? From all the work that I've done, the many years that I've seen people for psychotherapy, the many people that I've spoken to across the world, really, and from my own experience of being in relationship, of working at relationship, I have come to see that the main issue that really affects many people and gets in our way is fear. Fear. What exactly are we afraid of? Well, the fear that I'm talking about has to do with our emotions, has to do with our own feelings. We're afraid of our own feelings, and we're also afraid of sharing our feelings, of being more emotionally revealing with our partners. Now, it's not a fear that many of us are aware of. It can show up in very subtle ways and sneak past us. So we don't actually realize that we're afraid. But if we stop and look at it, we can see that many of us are afraid to really open up and share what's inside of us. We're afraid of being vulnerable and drawing attention to ourselves, of looking foolish or seeming weak with our partners. We're afraid of being overwhelmed by our feelings, that we'll lose control or they'll get out of hand in some way. And some people may actually experience that with their emotions. We're afraid of being exposed, of being seen. We're afraid that we'll be ridiculed, that we'll be rejected, that if we really show up in a wholehearted way and let our partners really see what's honestly going on inside of us, that there's going to be problems. We're afraid to let our needs be known, to let our partners see that we need support, that we need care, that we need love. We think they should just know. But it's so hard for us to actually be able to communicate, not only communicate, but to honor that we have these needs and be able to share them. We may feel insecure. We may feel afraid, and we may need a reassurance. And it's difficult for us to allow for those things and be honest about those feelings with our partners. We're afraid to outwardly express our love, to let our partners really know just how much they mean to us, how much we depend on them. And another fear that many of us experience is of our own anger. We may be able to complain and act angry about things, but to really own our anger and to be clear about our boundaries, to be able to express when we're hurt and be assertive about our needs is a scary prospect for many of us. So really, this fear that I'm talking about has so much to do with being emotionally authentic with our partners. And honestly, many of these feelings and the fear itself are things that we're not even aware of, and we don't realize that it's hard for us to even acknowledge those feelings to ourselves, let alone share them with our partners. Now, it's problematic because our emotions really are there. Our core emotions, when we get down to the healthy center of our feelings, are there to be helpful to us. Really, our emotions should be our friends, and they should help us get to better places in our relationships. But when we have anxiety or fear and respond to our feelings unknowingly, albeit, it gets in the way of us being able to follow through on a natural process that would take us to a better place. So what do? Well, we end up doing all these things to make our feelings go away. We would call them defenses. And defenses are anything that we do to avoid having our feelings or to avoid sharing our feelings more directly with our partners. Things we're not even aware that we're doing. For instance, we may question ourselves. We may question our emotional reaction. We may question it so much that we just get caught up in our heads going over and over and playing the scenario or our feelings over and over again. One of my clients called this analysis paralysis. We get stuck in questioning ourselves. We may talk ourselves out of our feelings, tell us that there's really no reason to feel that way, or to tell ourselves to not make a big deal out of it. We may minimize our reaction. We can do things to distract ourselves. And we all know that in the age that we live in, there are plenty of things at our fingertips to be able to distract ourselves for a very long time. As I was saying before, we can just go around in circles and never get to the point or never actually deal with what we're feeling inside. We may actually just push our feelings down. So we get tense, our body tenses up, and it stops ourselves. It stops our emotional experience. It stops us from feeling it ourselves, and it also stops it from being communicated or seen or shared in some way. We may just change the subject so that we're not moving into emotional territory. We may, as a defense, just go into fix-it mode. Many of us do this. So we try to fix the problem and just make it go away. And in a way, what we're doing is trying to make our feelings go away. We may show the feelings that we're comfortable showing and then not show others. For instance, maybe we have an easier time seeming angry, so we may get into arguments, which is not necessarily an expression of anger, a healthy expression of anger. But it's a feeling, and it's the feeling that we're leading with. And actually that might belie that what we're feeling inside is afraid, or sad, or hurt. Or conversely, maybe it's easier for us to show our sadness. Maybe we're quick to tears, but underneath, we may actually be feeling angry about something that happened. So the core feeling, the anger or the hurt, whatever it might be, is actually masked by some other feeling that we have an easier time with. We might avoid emotional situations, not bring something up, avoid conflict, avoid intimacy, anything to avoid the emotional experience. We might just simply turn away, disconnect, or shut down and go quiet. They're all ways in which we avoid our emotional experience, in which we avoid being present with our partners, with our feelings. And then what happens? Well, we run into problems. We may end up feeling anxious often or depressed. We feel insecure in our relationship. We end up fighting, and it doesn't really get us anywhere. We feel distant. We don't feel close. We feel stuck. We feel misunderstood. All the things that people come in telling me and complaining to me about that they're experiencing in their lives. We may have angry outbursts. We may have sexual difficulties. Again, these repeated patterns that don't really get us anywhere better. And we feel hopeless, we feel despair, and we feel that something's missing. This is what happens when this fear goes unnoticed and controls, actually, our behavior. Maybe this seems far-fetched to you. Maybe you're listening to me and you're thinking, I'm not afraid of my feelings. I'm an emotional person. This doesn't feel like it fits for me. Maybe it doesn't. Maybe that's not the issue for you. But what I also want to say is, because this fear can lurk under the surface, we don't realize it. And this actually was my experience. It wasn't till I was in my 30s when I started to see a therapist who really focused on my emotional experience and what was going on inside of me, that I came to see just how much anxiety and fear I had around my emotional experience. It's not that I wasn't in touch with some of my feelings, but there was a whole host of my emotional experience that was actually pretty conflictual for me, that I had to learn, first of all, start to be able to see what was going on for me, and then had to learn to begin to face in order for things to change for me. And that's really what I'm here to talk to you about, is helping you to face what's going on inside of you so that you can change things as well. So the main problem that we're running into is not just that we're afraid, is that we're unaware of what's actually going on for us. We don't understand how the fear shows up. We aren't aware of the signs that we're feeling afraid or we're feeling anxious. We aren't aware of what's happening inside of us emotionally. Our defenses, the things that we do to avoid our feelings, have become so habitual and so reflexive that we don't even realize that they're defenses. We just think, this is who I am, this is how I respond. We're so identified with them that we think that they're part of our identity. We don't realize that they're strategies that we developed a long time ago to avoid our emotional experience. And that's a problem, because when we're not aware, we're powerless to do things differently. If you don't see what's going on, if you can't see it, then how can you make a change? So if you're still wondering if whether this explanation fits for you, let's try doing an exercise in the last part of this first video that I'm sharing with you. So take a moment with me and think about your relationship with your partner. If you aren't with a partner right now, if you don't have a partner, maybe think about a past relationship, or think about someone else significant in your life, some other love relationship. And I want you to be honest with yourself. I want you to think about what it would be like to share something about yourself, or to share to share a feeling that's not one that you would typically share. For instance, if it's hard for you to feel vulnerable, or to own that you're feeling afraid, or that you have doubts about the relationship or about the other person, or if you're feeling afraid of some other thing, it doesn't matter. What matters is, what we want to look at is, what would it be like for us to do those very things? Maybe it's a feeling of anger, and what it would be like for you to assert yourself, to say, I didn't appreciate when such a thing happened, or that really hurt my feelings when you forgot to do whatever you said that you were going to do, or something. Think about the different feelings that you have. Think about what it would be like to be more emotionally honest. And all I want you to do is to try to imagine doing that with your partner or significant other. Imagine telling them, sharing with them, that you feel hurt, that you feel afraid, that you feel vulnerable, that you need them, that you want to be closer, that you're feeling angry about something in particular, that you're feeling overjoyed, that you're feeling proud of something that you did, anything that you wouldn't typically do. And as you imagine that, pay attention to what that feels like in your body. Give yourself just a moment to try to picture it, leaning in this different way. And notice what happens for you physically. Maybe you notice that it just feels fine. Or perhaps you notice that your body starts to get tense, that you feel uncomfortable in some way, that you feel anxious. This is your nervous system responding. This is your nervous system responding as though you're about to do something that's dangerous in some way. It's not dangerous, but that's what we learned. And that's how it shows up for us. That's one of the ways that our fear begins to show up for us. if you were feeling any of those things, then you're beginning to have a here and now experience of how our a fear of our feelings shows up. And let's think about it. All you were doing was imagining actually sharing these feelings. You weren't actually doing it. So why is it that we're afraid of our feelings, of being more emotionally open with our partners? Well, that's what we're going to look at in our next video, and I hope that you'll join me for that.